that all trucks of a certain category have to be electric by 2030. So Philadelphia has some regulations on the books that, based on my reading, seem to give the city the power to regulate large developers that are responsible for creating a lot of truck traffic. There's a thing called the complex source regulation. As far as I can tell, they don't use it, but it looks like they just updated it 5 years ago. So the regulation exists, and my read is that it could apply to this site. So I think that our local government has tools, and we could press them to use them. None of these things will happen without a lot of organizing and building a lot of power. But I think, this is just such an enormous project, and there's so many people who care about it, that I think we do have the potential to get some real wins and mandate that they use trucks that aren't going to spew toxic pollution into everybody's lungs and make people sick. And just one more thing I wanted to highlight is that truck traffic, even though there are many fewer trucks on the road than cars, they're responsible for a vastly disproportionate amount of the pollution. Like in the state of New Jersey, only 4% of the vehicles are trucks, but they produce about 25% of the pollution. And folks in the communities surrounding the refinery have already had their health damaged by decades of toxic pollution and are even more vulnerable to further pollution. So I think that's yet another argument that we can use to make these demands. So so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
How's the tech coming? Are we good, or should we?
Good. Do you need this slide, this PowerPoint up now?
You still have it.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. All right. Next, we're going to hear from Isabel Coupe. She's the assistant project manager at Green Building United. Green Building United promotes the development of buildings that are sustainable, healthy for inhabitants, resilient, and cost-effective. Through education, advocacy, and strategic initiatives, Green Building United informs and engages individuals and organizations to transform the way buildings and communities are designed, built, and operated. Isabel is going to talk about fossil-free warehousing and how buildings are powered and heated.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you to my two previous panelists who have before me. And a lot of what we're talking about will provide a lot of context. But my presentation is just going to be kind of on how these warehouses are powered and heated and cooled, and everything that goes into the fossil fuels of a building. Move on to the next slide. So my name is Isabel Coupe. I'm a program manager with Green Building United, and we are a Philadelphia-based nonprofit with a vision for a sustainable, healthy, and resilient built environment for all. A lot of the time in green building spaces, sustainable building and sustainable design is only really accessible to people who can afford to put in all these high-cost measures and all these high-cost equipment into their homes and spaces. But it's really important that everyone has access to safe and healthy and green homes and green schools, green jobs, and green community spaces. So we kind of work every day to foster transformative impact in our communities through green building education and advocacy. Next slide. So recently, Green Building United partnered with some groups up in the Lehigh Valley to put on a 3-part series called the Sustainable Warehouse Forum. So as Mitch said, warehouses are popping up all over the country and all over the world as e-commerce becomes more popular, but we really need to make sure that communities are kept in mind as these pop up across the nation. And we really think that there's an opportunity with Philly Thrive and with the Southwest Philadelphia communities to get Hillco to commit to fossil-free development at the Bellwether District. Next slide. So Mitch talked a lot about this, these plans that Hillco is promising and the plans that they're committing to and what we need to ask of them. So the promise that Hillco made after acquiring the site of the former PES refinery, it can't be forgotten or diluted. For hundreds of years, I think since 1880, this site has polluted and harmed the people of South Philadelphia. And the commitment to carbon-free development is kind of a sign of a new prioritization of people and their environment over profits. So if a place where for hundreds of years, oil and industrialization and pollution was the main output, could be replaced with green jobs, green energy, green buildings, and community prioritization, it could really transform the health and the lives of people in the city and the neighborhood. And so for these reasons, this is why Hillco must commit to methods of running the new bellwether district that has a positive effect on their neighborhoods and not just continuously burning fossil fuels in both the building and the vehicles traveling to the buildings. And so here we can see some of what Hillco kind of made commitments to, and a lot of these commitments are very malleable. They're not hard, they're not strong commitments. They're just saying, we might do solar, we might have a really high performance green building, but what we really need is for advocates and activists to say, we demand that you do this. You have to put in solar. You can't just say, we'll do it 50 years in the future, put it in now, so that way we know that it's actually gonna happen.
That's right.
Next slide. So a lot of these high performance buildings, people have this idea that they're really far out there, they're really state of the art, they're impossible to do, but they are actually being done all across the world right now. And so we're gonna look at 3 kind of fossil-free, carbon-free buildings that don't really use a lot of energy because of the way they've been designed and what they've committed to their communities and customers. Get to the next slide. So first, we're going to take a look at McCormick & Company. And McCormick & Company is a global leader of the spice and seasoning market. They have national headquarters and distributions located throughout Maryland. So over 10 years ago, McCormick & Company wanted to find a way to make their building operations more energy efficient, and in combination with their rooftop solar, they actually achieved what's called net zero energy usage. And that means that they use less energy than they're actually producing from all the solar that they're able to put on their roofs. And it sounds like a really big task, but I think when they were describing this, it wasn't even intentional. What they did was a few measures. They just upgraded to LEDs, which are really, high energy efficient light bulbs. They fixed their heating and air conditioning system. I think they replaced some of their roof, and they did all these things. They cut their energy usage in half, and then a few years later, they put solar on top, and now they're actually getting money back from all of the adjustments that they did. And I think even with that cost of putting solar on their roof, they paid for it off in 5 years or so. So it's really possible for a large organization to make these commitments to environment and to people, and for them still to prioritize, what they see as profit prioritization. Next slide. There's also groups out in another warehouse and large distributor is REI, and they are a outdoor retailer store. They're national. But their customer support really calls on them to make sustainable efforts. They call on them to care about the environment. And so they actually went in with the intention of being fossil free. And they were able to meet those goals in much the same way that the spice facility in Maryland did. But they also had to look at water usage because they're out in the Arizona desert. They're even more energy efficient and producing even more solar because they're a larger facility than the ones in Maryland. But it just shows that for this, they also had to work with a lot of community partners and figure out where they're going to find funding, how they're going to do the construction, actually teach people how they're going to do this new green construction to make sure the building is energy efficient. Because people don't just wake up with their minds and go, okay, here's how we design a building, and it doesn't need as much fossil fuels. They actually need to be trained and educated on that. So that community that this warehouse was built in, it kind of offered them some benefit, even if there's still a warehouse. You kind of get a little bit of something back, and then you can go and use those skills to help your own community homes and your own community spaces. You can now take that green building lesson that you're learning. I think we can go to the last case study, and this is a lot of what Mitch was talking about with Prologis. Prologis is the biggest logistics, distribution, They send your trucks from California to New Jersey to Chicago to Texas, all across the world. They have 1.2 billion square feet of warehouses and distribution centers. But they have actually achieved fossil fuel-free development in a lot of their buildings. And so for Hilco to say, this is unfeasible, this is impossible, while all of these other facilities, one of them even did it, not even on purpose to commit to fossil fuel-free development, we can see from all these case studies that it is possible if we are actively engaged in making sure that they're signing on to the right community benefit agreements and they're committing deeply to a just transition to better energy, not just switching over to natural gas, which is just the pollution still on the site. It's a mile away, it's right next door. We just switch to natural gas instead of solar, or instead of heat pumps, which are used to heat an area instead of burning gas. It's not really gonna lower that fossil fuel usage, and it's not gonna lower the pollution that the people in the neighborhood are already facing. Go to the next slide. So, in conclusion, fossil fuel-free development feels like it's kind of this faraway goal to a lot of people, but it's really becoming the norm in warehouse and distribution centers, such as this one that Hilco's planning for the Bellwether district. But they truly need to examine the possibility and prepare for a fossil-free future. It's not just in our best interest as people who live in the city and as people next, in the neighborhood. It's in their best interest as well. And it's in our best interest to demand that they take these concerns seriously. I'm not sure if a lot of people were in the La Biello presentation that they had in this room earlier, and they were talking about how when Hilco was in their neighborhood, they created a lot of community benefit agreements, but a lot of those things kind of fell through, and Hilco didn't commit to them. So it's really important that, in this first planning phase, as they, decide how they're gonna develop the district, we say, you have to commit to this specific amount of solar and this specific amount of preparation for when we do get electric trucks in this area. And so we need to ensure that they're maximizing solar options, designing with energy efficiency in mind first, because if they do it later, they'll say, oh, it's too expensive, we can't go back and fix it, and then we wouldn't really get what the community needs. And we also need to prepare the site for electrical capacity for these electric trucks. I believe that's it.
Thank you so much, Isabel. It was really helpful to hear about actual warehouses and other places that are already doing this to know that what we can specifically ask for in a CPA, because I don't think a lot of us have heard about that before. All right, our next speaker is going to be Micah Gold-Martel. He's the founder of Solar States, and Solar States' mission is to install solar and educate the next generation of solar installers. They have completed over 800 projects and impacted hundreds of students through their curriculum and job placement. Micah will be talking about challenges and opportunities for solar energy in Philly and the potential use for the Bellwether district.
Awesome, thank you.
Did you want to get your...
To all the presenters. If you could just pull up solarstates.com, that would be great. Just a brief bit about Solar States. Our mission is to be the on-ramp to the green collar economy for inner city Philadelphians. And we do that through partnerships with deeply rooted nonprofits in our communities. For example, Philadelphia OIC at Broad and Girard, as well as PowerCore PHL at Law School, 23rd and Master, and the ECA, near 2nd and Clearfield. We have set up solar training centers in those places. And I think, first off, you folks are doing great work and you're making my job a lot easier, because folks who are advocating for solar, what you're doing is you're saying we want jobs in our communities, right? Because you can't install solar without jobs in our communities. We need lots of people. And that's really what it's about. And honestly, I think it's the big mistake that environmentalists such as myself, so I'm including myself in this mistake, made, 10, 15 years ago, as we were starting to really talk about environmentalism, we were really talking about, polar ice caps and polar bears, and all that stuff is important, but, where I grew up in Powellton, people were talking about, how do I pay for daycare tomorrow? How do I get some food for my family tomorrow? And that is environmentalism too, believe it or not, because environmentalism is about work. It's about dignity in your work. It's about working in your community to make it cleaner and better, and getting paid in such a way that you can raise your family, such that you can pay for daycare tomorrow, and you can pay for the food that you have to have on your plate. So I think the question then becomes, when you have a company like Hilco come here, how are we going to make this work, right? How are we going to make this work so that our community benefits? And there's a number of ways we can look at that. And I tend to be a pretty simple person. I like to use the carrot and stick example here. And I would say that Hilco is going to see regulation as a stick, right? We want to hit them with the stick to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do. And I think that there's room for both, frankly. But one of the ways that I'm trying to influence, and I think we all could think about this a little bit, is Hilco is coming here for profit. I mean, let's face it, that's the bottom line of any non-B Corp company in America. They're trying to make money. We live here. And so how do we align those two things? How do we say, you're here for profit and we know it, let's just not, slap lipstick on a pig here. It is what it is. And we need to live here. So if you're profiting and it's making us harder to live here, that's going to be a problem, right?
That's right.
But how can we align those things? Well, this is where I think solar gives us a really unique opportunity to throw the carrot out there and to say, guess what? When you're doing solar in your facilities, your electrical rates will be cut more than half. It's a profit thing then. You can make more money by bringing jobs to our community. And guess what? If your electrical rates are so low, and by the way, when you model out the electric rates on this scale, Mitch and I were just talking, I mean, there's a potential for 60 to 90 megawatts of solar. Now that's probably not something people here can really conceptualize when I say it. Let me tell you that that's hundreds of thousands of solar panels. It's jobs for 4 to 5 years at least installing, at least. It could be 10 plus years of work easily. But the scale of it even then, I don't think is really attainable. It's more solar than I think we have in the entire city right now. Let's put it to you like that, okay? So why would they want to do that? How can we align this goal with what they want to do, which is profit? Well, guess what? When people go to rent these warehouses, they want cheap operating expenses. They want lower electrical rates. There's only one way they're going to deliver that, and that's through solar. You really can't get what's called a power purchase agreement that's going to beat the cost of solar energy. That's how low solar energy has come down in cost, particularly at this scale. When you're rolling it out on football fields worth of roof space, it gets extremely inexpensive without, by the way, without doing it on the backs of the workers. Guess what workers will get paid on projects like this? Because it is mandated. They're going to take a 30% federal tax credit in order to do this. That's perfectly fine. That's what the Inflation Reduction Act laid out. But what it's going to require automatically by law is what's called prevailing wage. And the people who work on these projects get paid as electricians at prevailing wage. That rate is $100 an hour, okay? I've seen that happen. We worked at Yards. Finley was our engineer back there for Yards Brewing, okay? We installed for 8 months there. Our workers got paid $100 an hour. I have seen nothing that brings wealth to communities faster than that, okay? So it can be a win-win. This is not a zero-sum game where somebody has to lose and somebody else has to win. We can all win together here as long as we present this in a way where we say, okay, your win is that you're going to get A, a green facility. I think that's going to attract tenants. B, a lot cheaper electricity. And you could, by the way, make a little money there too by playing the middle person and charging a little bit more than what it actually costs you to install. And you'll still be lower than PICO rates, than publicized rates. And then lastly, it's going to set you up for an electrical future where these trucks are going to be coming in and charging, and you're already going to have locked in rates so that you can benefit from increased electrification of your site. And I think that's the way that we really make this a compelling argument to people like Hilco, because that's what they want to hear. They want to hear, how can I make more money? Well, we can do that, and we can benefit as a community. Now, there is a flip side of it, right? They could go out and they can hire bad electrical contractors. They can hire bad installers. That's a place where I think we come back to the stick and we say to them, it isn't good enough to just hire any old company. We want local companies. We want local jobs. You can't go to, fly some people in from Wisconsin to install this because their cost of living is a lot cheaper and you can get it done a little bit cheaper. Even though the wages are set by the Inflation Reduction Act, people find all sorts of crazy ways to get around that sort of stuff. And that's where we say, nope, we're not going to accept that. Play by the rules, do this the right way, and we can all win. And by the way, we also have to let them know, when you're doing that, you'll get the highest quality installation. If you can click on the education section, and this is where I think what we do, free education programs right there. This is where I think, having an installer that is entrenched in the community really benefits. Is because you get folks like Mark, who's in this video, who's from North Philadelphia, and Cottrell, and Aunt Ross, and Aunt Fortune, and all of the folks, we're 50 people strong. All of those folks came through our training programs. And that's important because a lot of times, I think these developers feel like, oh, we're giving stuff away from the community. I think we need to change that narrative as well. So the community's earned their stuff. We've earned what we want to do. We've earned it because we've demonstrated that we're the best solar installation company in the area. We've earned it because we've done right by our employees. And this community has earned the right to have clean air because you've suffered for so long by having a fossil fuel facility right in your backyard that profited hugely, while you folks were left with all of the bad air to breathe and the tough environment to live in, all the vehicles that have to go through your neighborhoods. Right? So you've earned it. It's not a giveaway, it's an earning thing.
Right.
Okay? So I think if we change the narrative in that sort of way, that we'll be very successful in our negotiations. And I'm hopeful. They came to us, they asked us early on to give some proposals. They've sort of gone quiet for a while now. Let's bring them back to the table. Let's share this narrative about how we can all win.
Yay, that sounds good to me.
Miss Sylvia, do you want to go? Or you can, it's up to you. It's been a long day.
I agree with everyone that
Sounds
spoke.
good.
Everything sounds beautiful. I hope we do help them get involved with the community. We really need it because it's too many people have suffered so severely in this community since they've been there 154 years. Enough is enough. We don't want any more killings because that's what it is, undercover killing. Enough is enough. The billionaires fly in and fly out. And what do? Suffer. My 2 daughters cancer. And one has a cancer that can't be cured, blood cancer. Enough is enough. She said, I went to college, now I'm ready to die and know it. We don't usually know when we're gonna die, Enough is enough. And I hope these people do accept what programs are out there to help us. They have the money to do it. They can do it if they really want to. You know, we took people around yesterday to see what the refinery looked like. It's humongous. That refinery, and they tore down a lot of tanks, but it's a humongous place from the airport to Jersey. And it's unbelievable damage that they have done to people. The damage, the suffering that children have had to endure from all this. So with all these good ideas, it sounds wonderful. And I hope that we can convince them, or else they gotta go. They gotta go. In other words, we got the other company to leave here. And I started back in 1968. When it first blew up, I was out in the community fighting, trying to get rid of them. When Frank Rizzo ran and broke his leg, I was saying that this morning, you know, and they seen what it does to people, you know, and children. I mean, people's windows coming out, people's homes. My home shook because I'm right here on it. You know, that's frightening. You don't know if you're gonna be alive. That's bad when you have undercover killing. You know?
All right, let's open it up to questions. It looks like we have a lot. Let's start with here.
Yeah, I was just at the workshop this morning about Chicago, and Hilco gave out nothing, you know? And, I mean, yeah, this neighborhood, I grew up in Delaware, like, we have some of the highest cancer rates in the country, and, I mean, it affects all of us. Fossil fuels, people have been making money off of our health. So I want to ask, I mean, solar is amazing, and we can ask things that make sense for sure, but I think we should ask for more, and ask in a way that is not just please, thank you, but this is not games, okay? Like, we're not playing around here. This is Philadelphia. I mean, I'm just saying, like, I think, you know, there's a lot going on right now all over the world that's very progressive technology happening, you know, batteries. The thing that sticks out in my mind is simple stuff. Towers that can generate, I mean, hold electricity, basically operating like a elevated reservoir, which is the most efficient battery that you can produce, a mechanical battery. And these things are, I mean, it's mechanical energy. It's sort of caveman science here, but it's so compelling that we can do these simple things that will actually lead to saving lives. I mean, this is our health we were talking about. So this is a public health issue. We should act like it and just not accept halfway.
Question for Mitch, actually, maybe two questions for Mitch. First of all, rail transportation to the area. If you're gonna have jobs in the area, you're gonna have to get goods in and goods out. So one question is rail transportation, the other is public transportation, because you've got to get workers in and out. What, could you comment on extending public transportation into the area, possibly designing the streets so that they're well designed for bus service and things like that, which many streets frankly are not?
I mean, yeah, I was only focusing on the one thing, but there's like 100 of them. So there is a lot of rail infrastructure in the area. They were actually, PES, the refinery, was bringing crude oil by rail to the refinery, which is something nobody who lived here wanted because it was dangerous and terrifying. I haven't heard Hilco say much about that. We're in the middle of like multiple, it's like one of the reasons they wanted to make this a logistics hub, as they call it, is because there is the port, and there's the airport, and there are the major highways, and there's freight rail infrastructure nearby. I have not heard them comment about plans for like moving freight rail to truck or trucks to rail or whatever. I imagine that's in the mix, but we have not, to my knowledge, no one has had that conversation with them. I think maximizing the use of trains rather than trucks would have air quality benefits, although the freight lines are all diesel powered. So it's complicated, and I think we really need to get into that conversation with them. They've shared very few details about what their plans are, who their tenants would be. The only real specific that I've heard so far is that the Port of Philadelphia brings in a lot of produce, like from South America and other locations, and so they've talked about refrigerated or freezer warehouses to store fruit and vegetables that are brought in by ship. Beyond that, we really don't know. So those are all excellent questions, and they've sort of nodded to like, yeah, we'll like talk about improving bus service, but I haven't heard any specifics of that either. And we were all just opposing approval by the city planning commission and then city council for a number of bills that they requested, including laying new streets. And there were a lot of questions that were raised, like what kind of streets, for what purpose? I believe there was a brief mention of transit as part of that. Unfortunately, both the planning commission and city council said like, this is just preliminary approval. We'll figure out all those other details later. And what many of us said at the time was like, let's figure it out now. You don't give the developer everything they want and put off all the important questions for the indefinite future. So that is also a real, I mean, that's my opinion. So I think, yeah, we need to get into that, and there's been no substantive conversation that I'm aware of. Maybe Hilco is talking to SEPTA, but we haven't heard any details of what that plan is yet.
It sounds like from your presentations, which I want to say I really enjoyed, I learned so much and appreciate each one of them. But it sounds like it's a given that the warehouse industry is anticipated, that Hilco is committed to that. Might Philly Thrive and other groups also get behind pushing Hilco to bring in green energies that are productive, that are not just warehouses? One group that I'm involved with is very interested, for example, in the production of concrete, which in its traditional and current ways produces 8% of the pollution on the planet. Concrete is the substance next to water most used on planet Earth. And there are now technologies for creating strong and good concrete that is negative, is carbon negative, that actually can sequester CO2 from smokestacks and from direct air capture. And there are industries that could possibly come here for all those transportation hub reasons. And I wondered if that might also be something that Philly Thrive could give real leadership and emphasis to bring in other industries than warehousing. So it's not just warehousing. Your thoughts about that, I appreciate.
Does anyone want to comment on that?
I mean, I think that's part of the carrot, you know, it's like, if those industries can pay the rent, why not? You know, we gotta just throw it out there and say, look, we know industries we wanna have here, so pay rent on warehouse space. Choose them.
Yeah, it's true. It sounds good.
Yeah, now, one thing I'll just share is they're planning the southern portion of the site, they've slated for logistics, warehousing. The northern portion, they've slated for life science development. So like R&D and manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, etc. But like 700 some acres, which is most of the site, is for logistics. And they don't have a lot of tenants lined up yet, as far as I can tell. I think mostly this is all speculative development with not much clarity. So I can't speak on behalf of Olive Thrive, but nobody in Philly Thrive went to Hilco and said, please put warehouses here, I think.
Lisa?
You said like a number of megawatts of energy. To put that in context, could that power every truck that went in and out of like a logistics center?
It's hard to say because you have to take into account the power usage of the buildings, how energy efficient they are. Is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. It depends on the energy efficiency of the buildings themselves. But yes, it's certainly possible.
I have a question which is about Hilco and what their actual business is. Like, I'm not clear, are they an entity that buys something and then they simply are renting, like leasing, or are they buying the property and then they're selling off bits of it for people to develop their own things on that then they will own? Like, are they kind of like the meta thing, or are they just kind of buying it for now and then they're gonna sell out little pieces?
So, they specialize in like redevelopment of like brownfield sites. I think that I'm not an expert on this. My impression is that they have different, that they do multiple different things. So they can lease or they can sell off parts of the property. From what I understand, they are planning to manage the construction of all of the infrastructure and the buildings. I don't think they're committed to owning all of it long term, but I think they might own and lease some of the land and lease.
They're gonna be the developer of all the buildings.
That's what I have been told so far.
That
But not.
sounds freaking crazy.
Can't we call them out on the carpet, all of us? Can't we call them out, different organizations call them out on the carpet? We gotta push the pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
Call them out on the carpet. We can't sit around and guess. We have to let them know we're all together in this.
We're part of the
Not
stick.
just Philly Thrive,
Yeah.
you know?
We are part of the stick.
I mean, we all got 2 ears, 2 eyes, 1 nose and 1 mouth. We gotta put it together.
And do you know anything different than what I said about their
What about
plan
the
for like
carpet?
leasing versus selling?
Obviously
No,
not.
I think they're planning on leasing, but I'm not 100% sure.
If they're bold, we ought to be bold.
My question is about the district heating system in Philadelphia, the steam pipes that heat and cool buildings in Center City and in West Philly. Do we know if in the construction of these new buildings, Hilco is considering using that? Would that even make sense?
I don't think they've committed to anything. I mean, the vicinity plant where all the steam is generated is right next door.
Yeah.
When you generate the steam at that plant, it makes it so there's less emissions on site, at the site, when you're burning the natural gas to heat the space that you have. I think what Hilco is focused on, like we've all said, is they're focused on profits. Steam is more expensive than gas in Philadelphia. They're probably getting a really good deal on like having all this natural gas on their site compared to steam. And they could put steam there and that could be good for their buildings. It's just, we have to force them to say, you have to commit to something that uses less greenhouse gas emissions, that's more fossil fuel free. There's always a choice that they can make to be more fossil fuel free. They just have to choose, or we have to force them to make that choice. More likely force them.
I just want to say right here and now, solar is cheaper than gas, solar electricity. All you have to do is do it.
And so, we, like, through other work that I do related to PGW, through the power interface, we learned that PGW has asked for approval to spend a few $1 million putting new gas service lines and mains for the site to provide gas for the buildings that Hilco wants to build. They have not been given approval for that because they don't have a signed contract. And so I think that folks at Vicinity, which is the operator of the steam loop, have talked to Hilco, but my impression is that Hilco are assuming that they will be using gas in their buildings because they've been having these conversations with PGW. They're supposed to be producing what they call an energy master plan. They brought in a consultant to do an energy master plan for the site. So one of the things that we've asked them is like, A, we wanna see that. Like, make it a public document so that we can all scrutinize it and comment on it and give you feedback. Like, and B, tell your consultants to develop scenarios for fossil-free development. That energy master plan should look at options for heating all of your buildings with heat pumps, geothermal or air source heat pumps, or maybe the steam loop because Vicinity wants to decarbonize their steam loop. It should look at options for solar. It should look at the electric charging infrastructure. You know, we haven't heard back about what will be included in that energy master plan, and there hasn't been any commitment to making it a public document. But to my mind, that's a very good, simple demand. Like, maybe they'll tell us, oh, we can't do X and Y, but like, at a minimum, we want to see your map. Show a comparison of different options. Let's talk about it for real. But they have not committed to that so far.
So what do? We gotta do something to call them out on the carpet.
It's an election years, perfect time to do all that.
So I just wanted to mention there's a youth theater performance at 2 p.m., but we can keep going for a little bit. I'm not sure exactly when they're starting. Go ahead.
Just kind of like a quick comment, which is just generally I find like if a business is not making a decision that is actually financially better for them, then there's probably someone else getting money somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm just like wondering, like who is connected to Hilco that's connected to like natural gas maybe, or coal or something, so that like they just assume that they're going to be using natural gas, because there's probably some hidden money somewhere that we could discover. And maybe they have in Chicago, maybe they've done some of that work already.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an inertia in education thing too, that, you know, they've sort of, well, in Chicago it was the cheapest gas was the cheapest electricity we could get. It's gonna be that way everywhere we go. And it just, sometimes it's an education thing.
Chicago put them out.
You know?
They're here now. They said enough is enough.
I think I just don't know enough about solar power and solar energy, but if solar is cheaper than gas, is there like, what are some of the reasons that, or what's stopping big corporations or like independent people from switching to solar, or just like not enough people know about it? Or?
Yeah, it's really an education thing. It's one of the things in the solar industry that we're battling is a perception from 15 years ago that solar is expensive.
Yeah.
Solar was expensive, frankly, 15 years ago. It was very expensive. The solar panels, it used to be that we would never put a solar panel in even a slightest bit of shade because it was so expensive. You wanted to get every ounce of production out of that. Well, the costs for solar have dropped precipitously. I mean, it's really, really gone down to the point where now the main costs in solar are like the permitting and engineering and soft cost things, customer acquisition. It has nothing to do with hardware. So I think what we're doing is we're battling that sort of older perception that solar energy is expensive.
And to add to that, when you're talking about infrastructure, and you're talking about gas, the city would pay for like putting the infrastructure for gas to the site, right? But they would have to pay for solar infrastructure. So when you add that to the like misperceptions and the lack of education, and they're like, oh my God, I'm seeing $1 billion signs of preparing infrastructure versus free, or like paid for by us, when in fact they could be making money very quickly off of it.
And also, I mean, when you logically think about it, let's think about gas. Like, you have to extract it, probably frack it in the middle of Pennsylvania, right? Get it out of the ground, transport it, pipeline, trucks, trains, whatever it is, all the way to here, and then burn it here. Okay, that's one method. Or you can sit solar panels on the roof and they collect sunlight. You know? It's
Let's
like,
go back to horse and buggy.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much to all our panelists.